everybody, this is Robbie Bessner, and we are about to embark on an episode for Healthy Hotline that you will never forget. Today I have a special guest. His name is Chef Collin Goodine, and he's Canadian born, grew there most of his life. Now he's spending with his wife half the time, or more than half the time in Canada. But during the winter months when it gets a little cold, he migrates like the birds down to South Florida. And so he's enjoying a little bit of the tropics, and he's bringing his special talents with him. He's been a master chef and in the food industry for most of his life, actually, at least for almost the last 30 years. He went from executive chef for hotel chains and so forth to small restaurants, doing catering. And he's truly a food expert. And now he's into health foods and all that other stuff. I'll give him an opportunity to talk in his own words about this more. Some of the things that I absolutely love about Chef Collin is he's deep rooted. Like, he kind of looks at food the way I look at the rice development I do here at Therasage, meaning he incorporates like nature and the balances of nature in his food preparations and the way that he expresses food and teaches people how to express food and their relationship, so to speak, to food. And that's actually kind of a fun topic to me. Imagine having a relationship with food. I mean, I'm having enough trouble having a relationship with my wife and my kids. And he's already talking about having relationships with food, mind you. He takes a multicultural approach to his applications, which I also find intriguing. And basically, I've studied food and dietary applications for 3 years straight. There's diets for blood type, there's diets for body type, there's ketogenic diets for your brain. There's all kinds of different kinds of dietary approaches. But what Chef Collin does that I have never seen, that's so unique, he's personable. He wraps his head around everything he does. He's meticulous. And because of all of his skill sets and how he portrays that in his applications, he's a teacher. And so he runs classes. He has internet classes. He does one-on-ones. It's kind of what we knew about Hippocrates, food is your medicine. Well, he is the antithesis of making food applications fun, having a relationship with food, and creating that experience into elevating your health and wellness. So with that, please join us, Chef Collin. As you know, today we are talking mostly about food preparations and things we can do as it pertains to the Lyme community out there. This is Lyme Awareness Month. And as you know, we're very intimate with the Lyme community. And so I'd like to start with you just talking a little bit about your background, your passion, and then let's sort of move towards, at the end of the day, I'd really like to leave people out there, our viewers, with information they can apply to their lives tomorrow, or even as early as today, that will make a difference. And so, Chef, please tell us a little bit more, color your background. Let's move that forward from sort of the beginning to where you are today. And then let's sort of dive in a little bit deeper and unpack, like you're unpacking groceries, let's unpack information that we think that can help people have a better understanding about how food can really elevate their health and well-being.
Absolutely. First off, let me say thank you very much for having me here, Robbie. I'm super, super excited to talk about food and, like you said, using food as medicine, because it truly, truly is. And I've learned that over the last year. So to fill you in on my journey, it started about 28 years ago when I got into food, and I was cooking food, and I love food, and I love everything about food. But I learned in the last maybe year and a half to 2 years that I may have been using food for the wrong intentions, or I may have been unknowingly hurting people. And what I mean by that is I was cooking really rich foods with dairies and glutens and all these things. And I myself wasn't the healthiest person in the world, to be honest. I was high stress. I wasn't moving. My nutrition was awful. So I spent most of my life that way. And then I actually learned what food can do, and it blew my mind. And then I dove deeper into that and I said, the cooking part's the easy part. Now I'm going to cook for the intention food was made for, and it opened up a whole new door. So now I'm super excited. My mission now is to help other people first realize that, and then secondly, implement that into their life. And like you said, change their food relationship as they know it now, meet them right where they are, like today, and move them forward to where they need to go, whatever that goal is. So that's what I'm doing now.
Well, since you shifted, because you had this whole sort of cathartic process, right? So you did, for those out there that don't know how grueling the food industry is, especially a top chef like yourself, you have no life. You're completely stressed out all the time. You're only as good as that food that you just plated, and your only joy is possibly seeing a smile on one of your patrons' faces when they have an opportunity to taste the food. And so you've gone from this sort of traditional approach to now finding yourself down a corridor that is more specific towards using food applications and your discipline towards the healthier side of things. And so, changing up that program, and I just love the transition that you made. So you've got all these skills that now you can apply to a very, very unique and much needed focus. We've got patients out there. We've got Lyme people in the community. Some of them really can't get out of bed. They can't even prepare their own meal well enough, prepare a meal that might be involving a little bit more tools, more time, I want to say agility, like they may actually have to beat eggs up and do all those kinds of things that they may not really be able to do right now because they're just not feeling up to it. Yeah. Are there primary foods that maybe we could teach people about today that we could start them off like with baby steps, so to speak, in their own, changing their body chemistry? Like for instance, some people might, like Twinkies, or they may like potato chips. There might be certain food groups that aren't really their friends, that maybe create an inflammatory response. And so, you sort of said it in a little different way when you were talking about high-rich foods that you were preparing, and they may not have been the healthiest. They certainly tasted great, and they may have, have been a good income source as a restaurateur, but really weren't necessarily the healthiest for you. So imagine if I were a Lyme patient right now and I wasn't feeling great, I couldn't really make my own meal. I do have my family to help me a little bit. What kinds of tips could you tell me that might, give me some better choices? Do this, not that. Start off with these kinds of foods and then work your way up towards that. Give us a little feel for that kind of stuff.
Well, you're absolutely, thanks, Robbie. You're absolutely right in the way that, so first, Lyme patients, inflammation, immune system, those kind of things are super, super important. And leaky gut comes into, digestion comes into it, and probiotics and prebiotics. And everyone's on a different part in their journey. And it's very important to know where you are on your journey to decipher what you need. And I always recommend people, first off, to have a food journal for everything. I have one, and right now I'm okay. I'm very balanced. But if something goes wrong, I want to look back and say, why am I waking up with brain fog? Why am I not clear? Why am I not focused? What did I do? What was my lifestyle like? And food is a big part of that. So people have journals, but I think a food journal, and not enough people have food journals, to write down not necessarily just what they ate, but how they felt, everything. Because it is a good playbook to look back and say, oh, these are the foods that I really like. And once you have that, then those become the foods that you eat all the time, because there's no triggers. They're not going to set you off. You're not going to go off, or there's less chance anyways. And that's where the balancing comes in. So first we do that elimination, and we kind of say, okay, let's start here. And the first part of that is definitely getting rid of the big threes, which is your gluten, your refined sugars, and your dairy. They got to go out. Our body says they don't like them anyways. That's an inflammatory right off the hop. And then we can look at other things, like maybe nightshades are an inflammatory for a lot of people. The eggplants and the tomatoes and the peppers and the capsicum family. they don't like those. So get those out. Or maybe even the way you cook food. People don't really know this, that when you're charring or high heat cooking actually affects the foods and might be an inflammatory. So again, that's where the journal is going to come in and be huge, because you're going to write down your preparation and how you do it. All of those things lead to inflammation, and that's what we want to reduce. So when you say, is there things you can put in and implicate right away? Yes. I mean, there's ancient medicines like spices, just a simple spice mix, you know, cooling spices or warm spices, finding out what they like, turmeric, ginger, those kind of things, eating ginger. Forget aspirin, just eat ginger. You know, it's really, really good for your digestion, and it's huge for pain and immunity. You know, 75% of immunity comes from our belly. So we need to take that right, and we need to act like it's a garden and give it good soil and let it make flowers that are supposed to be growing in our garden, and not weeds and not cracks and all those things. So we got to feed that. That's our first thing, right? So we eliminate those big ones and they're out. And then we start introducing new things. Soups is another great way to get a ton of nutrients. It's a good way to save money. It's a good way to save the planet. It's easy on digestion. I mean, if I was to say one thing, turn everything into a soup, because it's not hard to eat. You can't eat it on the go. So you have to calm down and say, okay, I'm going to eat a soup. It slows everything down. Soups are probably the number one. Teas and spices. Those, I would say, are three things that everybody should implement into their diet right away. And then out of that, we just take out, or we start adding things that are anti-inflammatories, like the blueberries or the broccolis, getting fiber in our diet. I mean, the list can go on and on. I get jazzed up about food because, and again, everyone's at a different point in their journey. So I would have to kind of know where you are and say, okay, this is what we need to do. But food journals, first and foremost, get rid of those big guys. No more gluten, no more dairy, no more sugars. Refined fats, no bad fats, just omega-3s like fish and nuts and avocados and olive oils. Those are all good for our body. And if we treat our body right and get the good microbiome, and you know, you hear that word quite a bit, but if we get the right digestion, our brain's clear, our immunity is great, you know, and then we're balanced. And that's what I really try to get, is balance inside of our body. And then we take care of the outside influences like stress and movement and all those.
Wow. You said a mouthful.
Yeah, there's lots.
Just for people that just tuned in, you know, you talk about elimination. And one thing when I studied dietary applications, the thing that, and I grew up on Long Island in New York, and all of my two siblings and my parents were sort of grossly overweight and obese. Mm. And I was this thick and skinny little marink. My mother couldn't give me enough food. Nothing would stick to my bones. And she would constantly eat something. I was a really active child. And so we were a Weight Watcher household, okay? And people that are out there that kind of, with the dietary industry, probably have heard that name. I always laughed because when I went to undergraduate school, and that was in Boston University, I laughed at myself because I thought I was the only guy on the food line that actually knew like how much the weight of like a handful of snow peas were. Like everything in Weight Watches was measured, you know? And it became so cumbersome. Like it was too much work to figure out what to put together for a meal to like balance it all out, you know? And then you've got these applications that the food industry says about the pyramid, which they've changed that pyramid orientation like 9 times in the last 2 months. So I don't think they got that right. And then the thing that always struck me was this thing about dieting. And I don't want to take us off the road too much, but when you say the word elimination, it's different than the word deprivation. And so I always found when people did diets that they liked a certain way of eating, and they said, well, I'm going to try the water diet, the watermelon diet, the seafood diet. The seafood diet, by the way, is the best diet I've ever been on. That's when you see food, you eat it. So I don't know if you've heard of that one. But the point I'm making is deprivation never kind of worked, because at some point your mind starts to go, I really want that ice cream, or I really want that pretzel, or I really want that something. And then you go from whatever you did for those 3 or 4 weeks, and in basically 2 hours, you completely throw that stuff out the window. And so what you're talking about is something altogether different. You're talking about, I don't know, stripping down the equation, getting rid of all the things that aren't necessary, and really starting from a sort of strong foundational elementary point of view, and then building it back up from there. Yeah. And so, elimination is sort of an important thing, because basically when we're eating food, and I love the food journaling point, because unless you write it down, there's sort of this cause and effect. You ate something and it affected you a certain way. And unless you kind of can understand that causation, what caused that effect through journaling, then you never really can kind of connect the dots and understand that maybe potato chips isn't so good for you, or using ketchup on your hamburger isn't so good for you, or maybe eating meat altogether isn't so good for you. But you don't quite know it unless you kind of understand how you felt beforehand, what you did, what change did you make, maybe the meal you took, and then how that affected you thereafter. So I like the idea of keeping track of that, because it makes you accountable for the decisions that you're making in your food choices. So back to the primals. I'm sorry, did you need to say something to that?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Also, what most people don't think about, and this has to do with the food prep, when you heat something or overheat, superheat, or when you add pressure, when you compress something, like it changes the organic composition of whatever you're going to be putting inside your mouth. So you may think, for instance, a big one for me is microwave ovens. People still out there, and many of the viewers out there use microwaves. And microwave ovens, yes, it will warm up your food, but if there's anything living, if there's anything valuable in the nutrition, it's right out the door. It knocks it right out. So yes, it's warm, but it's not nutritionally important to your body anymore. And if today's discussion is changing your way of thinking so that you can build a better platform to create that nutritional support that your body needs, because everyone out there today with Lyme disease, whether you're bedridden or you're asymptomatic, it doesn't matter. Food is still food, and the important part about food is the nutritional value, the holes that it fills inside your body, what your body needs from a nutritional point of view, and the best way to deliver that. And so sometimes food doesn't taste good, but it's good for you. And wouldn't it be great, and this is Chef Collin's specialty, is to make food that's good for you and also tastes good. Oh my goodness, what a world out there. Chef Collin does it in a unique way, because he wraps up all of his skill sets and all the years that he's applied this knowledge into teaching you virtually. So you don't have to he doesn't have to be in your home to do this. You can join one of his classes, or you can hire a chef to come on your screen at home and teach you and your family members how to organize your kitchen and how to food prep, how to make a good soup or make a good soup stock, make dressings, do all the things that you normally do and the normal choices that you make. But it's use this, not that, use this, not that. And he starts off in a sort of unique way by kind of doing an interview. So Robbie, tell me, what do you like to eat? Do you have food cravings? What are those? And so he wants to try to understand, which is also unique because he personalizes his food experience with you. He wants to keep you within the choices that you normally make, but just give you alternative choices that are healthy for you and get you into a direction that supports your immune system, supports your microbiome, your internal chemistry, and lowers inflammation. And these are all so important for everyone out there, but particularly for you guys that suffer from Lyme challenges, And so, wow, Chef, tell us some more. You have more ideas to give us that we can use tomorrow or the next day.
Going back to the diet is exactly that. There was someone who once told me that, humans are the only ones that go on diet. Every other species on the planet has a diet. They stick to it because it serves their body, and that's what they do instinctively. And I'm sure at one point, us as humans did that. And then, the big conglomerates came in and they made it, this pleasure trap that Dr. Lyle talks about. And we went down that road. And so I'm pretty excited that people are actually getting back on the health train. but it's a little bit scary because now big corporate America is coming in and putting vegan on things and putting healthy on things, and they're labeling it and marketing it so that it seems healthy. But I want everybody watching this to understand that whole foods is the only way. If you know where it comes from, where it's sourced, and you bought it yourself, you tangibly touched it, you washed it, you know it, that's better than anything you're going to get. And I'm going to use Beyond Burger, and I don't mean anything bad about it, but it's better than beef, but it's still not good for you. And I think that's what corporate America has kind of changed. And that's the, buyer beware is what I'm getting at for the viewers here. So just because it's vegan doesn't mean it's not chock full of gluten and sugar. So, watch your labels and keep an eye on what you're eating. So whole foods, plant-based, that's the way we're going to go. But yeah, so I promote not a diet. The Greeks call it, a way of life. And that's the way I like to look at it. It's a lifestyle. Everybody's is different. Everybody in their journey, with whether it be Lyme or you're on a raw diet, whatever it is, everyone's on a different point. And it's a lifestyle. If I'm busy and I'm running around and I got 3 jobs and what I'm going to eat is different than what maybe you're going to eat, Robbie. And we could have the same conditions. We might have the same internally, but our stresses are different. So our triggers are different. And it's very important to get to know your body. Again, going back to journaling, but get to know your body really well and know the signs of when things aren't good. And inflammation is the biggest one. I lost 20 pounds and it wasn't weight. It was inflammation, 100%. And it's just bringing that down and being more clear. And food is so huge when it comes to that. I can't stress that enough. Like, take out those 5 things. If there's anyone watching that still has dairy, get rid of it. It doesn't do the body good. There's a paradigm right there. Milk, it does the body good. I grew up thinking milk did the body good, and I drank a lot of it, and I wish I didn't, because now I know that my body doesn't want that. So there's certain things that maybe we should look a little further into. So, do some education and look into the food you have. That's why I always say whole food. And the journey from, where we were as humans eating roots and plants, and that's really a big part of it. And then where we came to, not every culture, I'm saying the Western culture is probably worse than most, but we fell into this trap where sugar is something that we want. Gluten's what we want, and convenience is what we want. And if I can eradicate that, because it's not hard to cook in your kitchen, and I'm telling everybody that it's not hard to cook, it's actually easy. And if we put the stigma on the kitchen that it's hard, and if we're putting all that pressure on us, yes, it's easy just to go out and get a burger. Absolutely it is. But it does nothing internally. And over time, all those triggers are going to create disease. It may not happen today, but 5 years down the road, you're going to feel that burger for 5 years. It's going to, you might end up with other problems that you didn't need by any means. And that's really what I want to get into people right in front of people and say, listen, start now, change your life now, because it's your future you is going to be happy if you do, for sure.
Wow. Well, I love that. Some of us out there, they just diet, dairy is something that they have in their diet, and there might be things that they could curtail. There aren't any sort of absolutes in this discussion today. But it occurred to me, first off, there's this whole processing business in the dairy business. My son is an organic farmer in Michigan, and his neighbor is Horizon dairy farmers. They're organic farmers, and so it's a interesting culture, the whole farming industry in general. But when I went out there, he said to me, Dad, I want you to go get some milk from Ron, the dairy farmer up the block. Come and join me. And so we took the car, we drove a mile, that's his closest neighbor, and we filled up this 1-gallon jug of unpasteurized cow milk. Now, my whole life, I've never had unpasteurized cow milk before. I couldn't really believe the difference, because they don't sell that in a food store, even in a Whole Foods or an organic food store. Even if it's organic milk, it's still, the dairy industry requires that it's pasteurized once it leaves the farm. But this again was milk that was just uttered that morning, and was fresh, and it was for the local community. So I filled up this jug, and so I fill the jug up, and then we put it in the car. And the mile that we drove from the farm to my son's farm, the movement in the car separated the milk out. And then when we got to put it into the kitchen, the whole 1/3 or a little less than a third was the cream that rose from the vibration of the car moving. And just like, and then I tasted this milk and I said, wow, this is just crazy. But crazy great. Truth be told, cow's milk is made for the calves. They're made for the population for their breed. We've modernized it to make it for human consumption, but the human consumption milk is the one that you get from your mother when you're nursing. It's a whole different ball of wax that we're talking about here. And so I so love your approach to all this. And I just wanted to go in a little bit further about some pearls that we can leave people with. I love the idea that it's not hard to learn how to cook in your home. I like the whole simplicity thing. There's so much joy that comes from preparing your own meal and then sitting down, and the sense of community you have with the rest of your family when you sit and you have the meal that you prepared, the joy you bring to, and you feel this as a chef when you prepare a plate of food for me. I felt that when I was in your presence recently. It was the most amazing meal I've ever had. And I saw all the colors and the textures and the food preparation. And you did it in such a seamlessly fluid motion. We were able to talk and enjoy each other's company. And before I knew it, voila, you asked me to come over and fill my plate up with some of the best food I've probably had in the last 6 months. So for that, I thank you.
Thank you.
And you made it seem so easy. And I know that you do this through your classes. Again, if you need to get to Chef Collin directly, you can go through his website or through his internet email, which is hello, HELLO, at chefgoodine.com. So it's CHEFGOODINE.com. Or he has an Instagram channel that you can get at, like the ampersands, the squiggly sign, at Chef Collin _. And that's how you can find him. So then he can kind of come into your home, come onto your screen. You can reach out to him directly based on what your needs are. He can give you the step-by-step way to sort of grab that lifeline to, pull yourself back to health. And it is a process, but it's a process of joy and love. And if you shift your thinking about food preparation away from what you see in advertisements on TV, because, I just never forget as a child that growing up, I'm a little older than you. And I remember what the food industry used to do. Like, they would take whatever the smells were going on in the kitchen, and rather than the ventilation going like outside, or through the back, they would ventilate it either into the restaurant or into the front of the restaurant. So when you walked by on the sidewalk, you smelled all this food or whatever was going on, hungry, and you couldn't wait to like jump inside that restaurant to figure out what the heck that smell was. And then, of course, once they had you in the restaurant, you ordered something. And most of those food preps weren't necessarily the best for you, So for the people out there, just give us some simple things. I mean, you mentioned simple soups and teas and those kinds of applications. But if I were bedridden, what kinds of things could I shift? Like either the drinks that I'm eating or some simple foods that I might be able to apply as early as tomorrow or next week that might make a shift, a little difference.
Depending on how mobile you are, and I think easy digestible foods, like I said, soups and teas are for sure. Juices, smoothies, I think those are easy to get into your diet, your body without, having to chew and start that inflammatory kind of process. But, ginger is a big one. Just getting those spices into you is huge. But even if you made a broth, even if it was just a vegetable broth from, scrap stalks of broccoli, you're going to get that nutrients, and you need those nutrients in. And if you needed like a little bit of fiber, papaya is great, pineapple, those kind of fruits are really, really good for you. Blueberries, they're anti-inflammatories. Those are simple, chewable, tasty fruits that get you going. And if you wanted to put the papaya with even, some probiotic yogurt, those would be great things too. If you need prebiotics, probiotics, I don't like supplements. We can get them all through food for sure. But the fiber acts as that prebiotic and getting some probiotics. So yogurt's really good to get into you. Turmeric, ginger, those kind of things. But easy, I think, digestibles. So broths and soups and smoothies and juices and those kind of things. But if you can get up and eat something, then I would eat maybe something that has a little bit more, if you don't mind chewing, like if that's not too much for you and you can chew, a big power bowl with nuts and olive oil, maybe some fish, like getting all that into you so that your gut can say, okay, let's do this. And I would do that around lunchtime because that's when our digestion is really ramped up and ready to go. And if we do that at night, it might make us a little bit more lethargic and be a little bit counterintuitive and slow us down a little bit more. So those are simple things. There's a new one that I'm sea moss. Sea moss is something I'm playing with. So it's like kelps and seafoods, like even the seagrass. I'm looking now into sea moss and using that gel and putting that into smoothies. It's got tons of nutrients and minerals, and I mean, it does everything for us. So that's something I'm adding to my diet now. And it's been a long time. I did my research on it, and I think it's very good. And I will come back on here and praise it if it does really amazing things, but it's said to do really amazing things. So you can do that and put it into any kind of liquid, really. What else can I tell you? There's a whole long list.
Well, you know, the sea urchin, the sea mosses and the kelps and so forth, they're highly concentrated in different kinds of minerals. And particularly they have iodine, which is super supportive for your thyroid health. And now we're living in a world, a very toxic world, where we've got, you know, explosions of atomic plants like Fukushima and Chernobyl. And those radiation proliferates around the globe. And so that affects our thyroid directly. And then we've got this monster called glyphosate, which is a chemical that Monsanto has been dumping in 200 tons a year for 20 years into our environment. And it causes what's called leaky gut. You mentioned it earlier. So we actually have leaky gut and leaky brain. And so now we've got these tissues that line our stomachs, our GI tract, that are called tight junctions. It's supposed to be like this. But what happens is the glyphosate chemical causes there to be little fissures, little cracks, sort of in the dike. And so undigested food and also bacteria, that's beneficial bacteria that's lining the inside of your gastrointestinal tract that are meant to help the digestion process is now leaking out of your gut into your blood. That also causes inflammation. So if it wasn't enough fun just dealing with Lyme alone, you now got Lyme and potential leaky gut that's happening just from the air and the water that we're drinking. And so we can fix all this. In fact, tight junctions, the lining of your GI tract repopulates, regenerates every 3 days. So by just shifting the foods that you're eating now to support gut health, to support that healthy bacteria, and you know you're an expert at this, so you know fermented foods are really good to repopulate the good bacteria that is used for digestion. There's more than 60,000 bacteria that are inside the gut. So they all live in sympathy or symbiotically to help they thrive, and they also help us thrive through their living process and so forth. And so keeping them in the gut and cutting back on leaky gut lowers inflammation. That's a big category for the Lyme community because they've got these parasites and co-infections that are outside in their tissues and they're causing havoc. And so the last thing you need is the extra contribution of a leaky gut that's adding more fuel to the problem, lowering your immune system and your ability to fight back for Lyme or any, you know, kinds of organisms that don't belong inside your body, parasites and so forth, mold. So this topic of food is so important, and I'm so honored to have you here today as a food specialist because I think it's an underserved category, especially for the Lyme community, and it being a Lyme Awareness Month, and just Lyme community in general is so underserved in the education process of the things that they can do for themselves that will really make a difference. And you can start this stuff as early as tomorrow. Before we leave, because we're kind of running out of time, I was just curious, you know, we touched a little bit on diets, and certainly you gave us some awesome tips about food prep and keeping a journal and managing triggers, elimination, things that are easy, primary foods that are easy to digest, to sort of create that sort of springboard. Oftentimes, and I've heard this, and I actually do this myself, because as a family, we've been intermittent fasting for more than 20 years. So that means that basically I have my last meal before 7 p.m. and then I generally don't eat for most of the day, the next day, and then I'll take my next meal, between 5 and 7. And so I'm kind of a one meal a day guy, but that's just my choice. And my choice, I've gone that way because basically I'm kind of get up and I embrace the sunshine in the day, and I meditate and I ask for forgiveness, and I'm grateful for things. And then I just dive right into my work. And once I get to my lab and once I get into my research, sometimes I can be doing that for days. In fact, my wife has to pull me out by my neck to make sure that at least I sleep and I get that one meal. But intermittent fasting, or actually a couple of 3 days of fasting, is sort of, as in my own research, like a hard reset for your body to give your organs a chance to rest a little bit, because people don't realize that when you're digesting food, it actually takes energy and body resources to digest food. So if you were coming off of a fast, if you were using fast as a Lyme patient to try to get that hard reset, what kinds of foods, like what order of things, and how would you introduce food back into, yourself, so you can sort of build yourself back up? So I've been drinking water for a couple, 3 days, I've cleared my system out, and now I want to jumpstart my body again. I'm not running out to Burger King to get a hamburger. I want to know, what kinds of foods would you recommend for all of us out there to sort of start, like the primary foods to restart my body?
Well, I always go to simple digestion foods, right? So maybe fruits at the beginning would be a little bit too hard for our body. We couldn't get that. It's a little bit too intense. So I always go to smooth things. So soup, again, is one of my biggest ones because I can puree it. It goes through me pretty quickly. That's definitely a good one. Broths that are rich in nutrients, teas with lots of ginger and all those kind of things are great. But that's where I would start, and then move closer to the bigger, harder foods that are more fiber rich and really get in there and kind of clog up our GI. But cherries, cherry juice, citrus water, those kind of things that are really going to give us what we need to kind of get back, and then say, okay, our body's really good here. And then slowly introduce things like maybe even hummuses, or, maybe an eggplant puree. So purees and those kind of things that we want to put into our body, just spread those over top of nut butters, if you want to make nut butters, and put them on, small pieces of lettuce. Those kind of things that are really hard, they're going to go through.
Chef Collin, you just mentioned like the word hummus, and I immediately started to salivate. And you know how I forget the ice cream company that makes 31 flavors? Chef Collin makes 30 or 40, probably 50 by now, flavors of different kinds of hummuses. And for all of you guys that are out there, we were talking about primal foods today, and Chef Collin, what he broke down for us, is like, let's keep it simple and sort of stupid. Let's look at the primal foods we need and get them into an easily digestible format. So soups and teas, and now he just mentioned nut butter, and he talked about hummuses. And so the process of making a hummus gives you an ability to put all kinds of amazing ingredients, not just for flavor, but just what it does for your body. So Chef, can you just spend a minute and talk about hummus? Because I meant to say this to you when I saw you last, that I just, enamored by that whole process in itself. And I would love someday for you to show us my wife and I, how to make some of these. Maybe the crew out there, people that are listening, you can tap into Chef Collin's knowledge base by just reaching out to him. But tell us a little bit about your whole journey down that trail about hummuses. How did that come about, and why is it so important? And spend a minute with us on that, please.
Yeah, so the reason that I mentioned that to you, I think a while back, I mentioned that I can do this in one clip, but what it was is a way of saying that if you know the methods, then what you bring after that is easy. And what I was trying to show people is that whether it's pickles or hummus or soup, it doesn't matter. If I teach you one, you can make hundreds. So the simple hummus, garlic, lemon, and chickpeas, and maybe olive oil. If not, depends if you're a purist. So you take that simple concept, and then you maybe change the bean. Maybe you're going to have this bean or this bean or this bean. And then maybe you change the acid and you're going to have lime instead of lemon. And then you start changing and having some fun, and it makes it a whole lot of fun. Then you throw a beet in there, or then you throw a carrot in there, or then you throw some curry in there, and you start playing with whatever flavors you can come up with, because it's a basic method. And then there's no inhibits. And that goes with everything. You just start with a simple method that you were taught, and you just have so much fun with it. And you can, honestly, the sky's the limit. When I say maybe 50, I'm going to see if I have 50 in my repertoire. But you can get there. You can definitely get to 50 very easily. There's no limits. It's a spread made with chickpeas or a legume of some sort, and then you just go from there and add anything you want to it. And the same thing with pickles. If you can pickle a cucumber, you can pickle a beet, you can pickle, and those are great. You said probiotics, so you can make your own, and you can take out the sugars. A lot of pickles have sugar. Just take those out. You can add your own flavors to it, and you're going to pickle it, whether it's naturally or a quick pickle. It's up to you, but you can have so much fun. You can pickle anything. You can make it. The cooking it's fun, and there's no limits. There's no limits, honestly.
Well, I see the joy. Everybody sees the joy in your face, and you're just overwhelming aura around food. Earlier, we started today with the food relationship, your relationship to food, and that food preparation. It's not just the sort of the basics of just buying it and eating it, but just having fun in the process, incorporating it into a lifestyle choice. So it's not work to cook. What it is a joy to cook. And that love, that expression, is actually that frequency of love and the joy and the fun of the prep and the feeling you get when you're eating it, knowing that you produced it and potentially nourishing the rest of your family, not just yourself, is such an important component to the process that it's truly amazing. I can't wait to taste all of your 40 flavors, maybe one by one, or learn the skill how to make it so that we can have our own joy and fun with that. So I'm going to take you up on an offer one day to actually show us how to do that. Again, you can get a hold of him through hello@chefgoodine.com or at his Instagram site @chefcollin_. Again, Chef Collin, thank you so much for joining us. And we really appreciate you.
Thank you, Robbie. Thanks. I'm very grateful to be here and share my knowledge with you. And thank you for taking the time to spend it with me.
Hey, everybody. It's Robbie Bessner. Thanks so much for joining us today. Please share this content with anyone that you think might benefit from it. And we're looking forward to having you with us tomorrow for another great interview.